So I see it is 6:31 p.m. Are we live and ready to go?
Yes.
Fantastic. So, folks, good evening. Happy fake spring and summer. Just because hey, come on, we know it's real. We know New York is 15 seasons. We're like in 12 and 13 of them right now.
That
So,
is true.
Absolutely.
right? I
Absolutely.
mean, so I hope people are staying warm because it is crazy. And so I am Carl Henry Cesar. I am a co-chair of the Brooklyn Community Board 14 Human Services Committee. And I also have my other co-chair here, Yvette Clergy, as well. So we're happy to have you folks here. So first off, we're gonna have a presentation from Mercy First, and we are joined here by Zani McCrimmon and Carisha Daly. And so, could the two of you, briefly introduce yourselves, and then yeah, go right into the presentation. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for
Okay.
having us.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys for allowing us to share this information with you guys and your platform. My name is Zani McCrimmon. I'm a foster parent recruiter and coach at Mercy First. I work in the Brooklyn office, as well as my colleague, Carisha Daly.
Hi, everyone. Like Zani just said, my name is Carisha Daly. I am also one of the foster parent recruiter at Mercy First.
Thank you, Carisha. So, let's just talk about Mercy First real quick. I'll give you guys a brief on Mercy First. We're a non-for-profit social service agency. We serve more than 3,000 children, teenagers, families each year in the New York metropolitan area since our inception by the Sisters of Mercy in 1894. So we're just here to talk about, the urgency and the need that we have in New York City in particular, our community of Brooklyn, as well as far as finding support, community support, and how we can work together as far as supporting children who need safe and stable homes.
Thank you, Zani. Like Zani said, before I really get into like the details of foster parenting, I really wanted to start with why this matters. So right now, there are children in our community who cannot safely remain at home and they need temporary foster placement. So while the system is designed to support them, unfortunately, one of our biggest challenges is that we don't have enough home. So because of this shortage, some children are placed in settings that aren't necessarily ideal, which can mean that they're separated from their siblings, they move multiple times, or they're just placed outside of their own community. And we try to avoid these disruptions as much as possible because unfortunately, these disruptions can have a real impact on their emotional well being, their education, and just their sense of stability. So, another thing I like to highlight is like Zani said, we serve over 3,000 kids. And that's just the kids that Mercy First serve. That's not the kids that's in totality, that's in care. And we want to remember that these people aren't just numbers, there are kids, real children who are navigating very difficult transitions, and they really need consistency, support, and a sense of belonging. Um, so another important piece is this is a very ongoing problem. Children enter care every single day, but unfortunately, the number of foster family is just not keeping up with the pace with that need. So we recognize that this isn't just like a system thing; it's also something that requires community awareness and involvement. So that's really why we're here and why conversations like this is really important because increasing awareness is one of the first steps towards hopefully helping more children to find the safe and a stable home.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Carisha. And just to piggyback of what she said, we are both recruiters, so we both do, direct outreach, which is kind of how I got in contact with Miss Sean Campbell. I went to a resource fair in Brooklyn and we met and, started a conversation. And I just wanted to share with her that I wanted to share with Brooklyn that we are trying to tap directly into the Brooklyn community because this is the office that we work in, and these are the children that we are trying to find homes for. So they're like Carisha mentioned, we serve 3,000 plus, but that's just our agency. right? So that's not New York City as a totality. So we want to do more quality outreach as opposed to just outreach everywhere in all five boroughs. We have offices in Brooklyn, we have offices in Queens and Staten Island. So our focus right now is basically tapping into those communities and trying to find uh, for prospective foster parents in those communities for those kids in those communities. So, who needs foster homes? It's a big pot. I mean, we could break it down into sibling groups, teens, children with different levels of need, whether that be behavioral issues, psychological, past trauma, stuff like that. But it's basically everyone. It's these are all of the children in New York. We have the siblings who are young. We have the teens. We have the children who could be young, who could be the teens that could be trying to come out of foster care. So we have fostering for all avenues basically, right? um just talking about that, the children in care, they come with a wide range of experiences. Some have trauma, some have instability, disruptions in their home. Their environment at home isn't just the best for their growth and their success, right? So that could show up in their behavior, their emotions, how they interact with others in society. So that's why we stress the importance of safe homes, safe families, stability, some form of structure, and sustainability, basically, just so they can have a sense of trust and belonging, and feel like they're not just out here because foster care has a negative stigma on the children. A lot of people, they think foster care and they immediately think, oh, these kids have problems. These kids come with XYZ. So we try to eliminate that stigma as well and let them know that these are just normal children that need a home. And it might be temporary, which is why our goal is reunification all the time, because we're looking for someone that's just going to open their home to a child, teenager, or sibling group that's just looking for that care and that need for that temporary time while maybe their biological family is dealing with whatever they're dealing with in that moment, right?
Thank you, Zani. Like Zani just said, at the core, foster care is just really about providing a safe, stable, and supportive home for a child on a temporary basis. Like Zani said, the goal is always reunification, which just means that the hope is not that is that children can safely return to their families once the necessary support and changes are in place. And just because foster care isn't typically a permanent arrangement, foster parents still play a critical role in the kid's life. They're the ones that are doing the day-to-day things, like making sure the children attend school, helping with routines, offering emotional support, and creating that sense of normalcy. So it's really just about showing up consistently and providing that stable environment. um, and also another thing that I want them to know as well is you're not doing it alone. You're part of a larger team, and that team can include caseworkers, therapists, school staff, and just other professionals who are all just working together to support the child and the family. So you're not expected to do this alone. We all know raising kids take a village, and we try as very much as we can to help support you or support them in that process. And there's also training that's provided during, before, along, with ongoing support to help foster parents feel prepared and confident. And we also know that even with these trainings, you really don't know what to expect until you're in it. So while you're in it, we still are there to support you through it as well. And that will include, guidance on things like behavior, communication, and just understanding trauma. And a big misconception is that, you need to be perfect or have all the answers to become a foster parent. And that's just not the case. Like we said, what's most important is being consistent, patient, and open to learning. Obviously, there are some rules and guidelines and things that you need to reach, but the main thing is just being consistent and willing to help.
Yep, absolutely. Before I continue, does anyone have any questions? Anybody before I continue? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about, like Carisha stated, the trainings, the support basically, right? So with the support, you have trainings. Like I said, I'm a coach myself. I do trainings. Carisha does trainings a couple of times a week as well. So we have trainings. A lot of times we have focus groups and panels where we may bring on a current foster parent, whether it's a regular foster parent, whether it's a kinship kind of a case, and we bring them on so they can express their personal testimonies and talk about their experiences, things that they're dealing with in their fostering experience today, and some of the experiences that they have with Mercy First in particular, right? Just so they can let prospective foster parents know that number one, they're not in this alone. Number two, not only do they have the training and support from Mercy First, but they have that shoulder to lean on from other foster parents that are in our agency. Because, for example, you may have a foster parent who can't provide a backup babysitter, but if in this network of foster parents, if you connect with another foster parent who's already fingerprinted, who's already documented and licensed, that can be an automatic resource for you guys, as a foster parent if you can't find backup. So just bringing these foster parents together and letting them know that it does take a village and that you are supported and you have all of the support, we have your back. It gives the prospective foster parents the answer to the question, can I do this? And the answer is yes. We're not looking for people with mansions and big homes and $1 million accounts, because that's not what raises children anyway, right? We all can agree on that, right? So that's really what the training is there for. You have a casework team that's coming to do wellness checks on you, the child, just the synergy of the home, how the family dynamic is operating now that it's a new child in the home. Just in case the other children in the home, financial support. The foster parents, they do get monthly stipends, depending on the needs of the child. So as long as they're taking care of their home, this is not money for you to spend. This is going directly to the child. And as long as they understand that and they can take care of their bills and household needs, they know that this money is strictly for the child's needs, whether it's clothing, food, shelter, schooling things, doctors, anything. So that money's for them. So the financial support is a big help as well. It's not something that we like to drive home for someone, because we don't want someone thinking that we don't want that to be the motivation, obviously. But, we just want everybody to know that they are supported in a number of avenues.
So thank you, Zani. Again,
Of
this
course.
isn't just a important issue, it's also a very urgent issue. And again, this is why community involvement plays such a critical role. Like we stated, right now, children are entering the foster care system every single day, but unfortunately, the number of available foster homes is not keeping up. And, sometimes this means that decisions are made that's based on availability rather than what's best for the child, like maybe separating the siblings, which we try very hard to not do as much as we can. But unfortunately, like I said, due to availability, sometimes we have no choice. And when we think about like stability, timing really matters. The longer a child waits for a stable placement, the more it can impact their emotional well-being, um, their their education, their ability to build consistent relationship. And again, this is where the community becomes really important, because we alone can't solve this issue. We rely on community awareness, partnerships, and individuals who are willing to step forward in different ways. We understand not everyone can be foster parents. Not everyone have what it takes or feel like that's their purpose, But that doesn't mean that you can't help as well, whether that's sharing information, connecting us to networks, or simply just help raise awareness. So oftentimes the right message just need to reach the right person. So spaces like this, community boards, excuse me, are especially powerful because you're connected to local residents, organizations, and networks that we may not have been able to reach otherwise. So the need is really urgent, but there's also like a real opportunity here. With increased awareness and community involvement, we can help to ensure that the children have access to safe, stable, and um sorry, safe, stable homes, when they need the most.
Thank you, Carisha. And again, just to piggyback off what Carisha said, sharing this information is the least, that we appreciate even being on this platform, because at the end of the day, like she said, we are both recruiters. Our role is strictly recruitment, coaching, documentation. So our job is to be outside on the field in these rooms and trying to reach the people that reach the people, i.e., community boards, hospitals, local churches, libraries, places where children and adults coexist anyway. You know what I mean? So just finding those resources, the influence. I was talking to Sean Campbell at the resource fair, and just that form of collaboration of tapping into the Brooklyn community, because this is where we want these homes. We mentioned earlier about how sometimes fostering, the child might be far removed. He might live in Brooklyn now, but his foster home might be in Long Island or something like that, and then that takes away from some of his or her normalcy. You know what I mean? As far as the friends, they're being removed from their school, so they're not seeing their friends. They might have a favorite, a favorite friend or a favorite just depending on the age, it might be a favorite toy, just things like that. So tapping into Brooklyn, being that we are in the Brooklyn office and we're trying to reach Brooklyn families, this is why community boards like this are so important. This is why the influence that community boards like this have is so important for us. So we can try to reach people that we might not have the voice or capability to reach. And it goes both ways, because now, in a sense, when it comes to resource fairs and things of that nature, there's another. If there hasn't been one, then now it is one. We have a foster agency now that's using the community board's resources to be in resource fairs and spread this awareness, whether we're in Flatbush or anywhere else in Brooklyn. So that's basically why we feel that connecting with guys like you, people like you, are important, because you already do a lot of the groundwork. So we just want to tap into that and kind of be another resource, and hope that we could use you guys as a resource as well, so we could get these children in some safe homes, because like Carisha mentioned, this is ongoing. This is not going to be a thing that's going to change next year or 2 years or 3 years from now, especially in New York City. So we just want to do our best and making sure that we are putting our best efforts forward and reaching the people who reach the people.
So thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today and just being open to hearing what we have to say. We really appreciate the opportunity to just share more about the needs of children in foster care and how we can work together to support them. If you're interested in hearing more or getting involved or partner with us, or feel free to reach out. Our contact information is on the screen. And we're also happy to answer any questions or provide any additional information. Yeah. You were saying something, Zani?
No, I was just piggybacking off what you were saying. If you guys have any questions, comments, anything, we'll be glad to answer. And again, thank you for having us too as well.
Definitely. So, Zani and Carisha, thank you so much for this presentation, and especially like sharing the work that you're doing on such an important cause. And so I do have some questions. Let me see if I see any other hands up first with questions. And so I see the district manager, Sean Campbell, has a question. And so District Manager Campbell, you're up.
Thanks. First of all, thank you for taking the time out to be with us and to do this presentation, put it all together, and spend an evening here. And I hope that we can look forward to seeing you at the nonprofit roundtable, where we'll be gathered with the other community-based organizations serving our community and beyond. That's on May 19th during the day, and invitations will go out shortly.
Okay.
I think of it as a good way for organizations to connect to others and build that network for referral. My question is, are you a city funded, do you have a city contract like through ACS or any other city agency?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
mostly ACS. Are those contracts typically paid on time or within a reasonable amount of time after you submit reimbursables? Or do they lag? It's not a trick question, I promise.
No, unfortunately, those aren't questions that we can answer.
Okay. And then my other question really is about your services. And I know like the citywide trends, and I wonder if you differ from them at all, that it seems that the percentage of children who are being placed in kinship foster homes is decreasing. Although happy to look at the data and see that placements, siblings together, is actually increasing. It kind of went up fairly significantly in the past 10 years. And that the in community placements is only about 30 something percent. And in borough is much closer to 90%. So I'm just like looking at those trends and wondering what Mercy First does differently, or where you struggle in terms of finding placements that are either in community and or with siblings, and what other challenges there are that seem either new or chronic.
Okay. For us, it's hard finding in community. Unfortunately, not a lot of people are interested in becoming foster parents, or they might think that they don't meet the requirements. Um, and also there's like the stigma with foster care, that oftentimes people think that these are like bad kids, when really and truly it's just kids that have been traumatized. The act of just removing someone from their home, from people that they've grown up with, that sense of safety, is often removed once they're in care. And then unfortunately, if they do get placed back into care, or they're separated from their siblings, that's an added level of trauma. And the longer they stay in care is also the more trauma that it is. And unfortunately, not a lot of people feel equipped to handle it. In terms of kinship, we try very hard to find those type of placements. So if there is someone that's in care, we try to identify like family members or like friend of the family, because that in itself is like a level of normalcy we can give back to the kids, because at least they're at least familiar with these people. But yeah, for us, it's been really a struggle to just find like community members. And then obviously we also have to recognize like the state of the country right now. And, things are expensive, and we also live in New York. And unfortunately, space is limited. So we also have to take those things into consideration. So with all of that, the community aspect has severely been lacking.
Yes, absolutely. And like to piggyback, like even with the kinship cases, like the kinship cases, they kind of come sometimes with a little bit more leniency, because you're dealing with someone who might be a family member or a close friend of a friend that's probably trying to, help out in the situation. And I guess the challenge, even in that, is just keeping people informed in a way where they feel like they can do it on a continuous level. Because I've had a kinship case where a woman took on her neighbor's daughter, and they were close knitted, and the community was close knitted. But we try to come from a trauma informed approach, so no one's blindsided once the child enters the home. And then it's like, well, I didn't know this was going to happen, and, those things. And the woman, she kind of told me, like, this is my daughter's best friend, like, we're good, I have it, I understand. And then 3 weeks later, after seeing unfamiliar behaviors, because it's one thing to see someone for 2 hours a day when they're playing with your daughter. It's a whole nother thing when they're moved into your home and now you're the provider and then, the guardian. So, and then it's like a circle back call now. It's like, wait a minute, I think this child might need a little bit more help than I thought. And it's like, this is why our whole approach is trauma informed. And we do a lot of coaching and supporting to let foster parents know that this is not an easy thing. Like Carisha stated, like everyone's not gonna feel like they can do this type of a thing, but those who are, we try to pour into them. We try to pour knowledge into them, support, so they understand that you are important. We found you out of I don't know how many million people in New York, and so we want to work with them and curate and build those relationships as well. So again, just circling back to what you asked, just the challenge is basically the community and getting new new minds and new perspective foster parents, as opposed to maybe like a kinship resource who kind of understands what they're already into.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for answering those questions, and thank you for asking that question, District Manager Campbell. I have a question as well, so it's a kind of multi-part question. So the first question is, how long would you say it takes on average for a family to go through the process with Mercy First of, I guess, being designated like a family that, children could stay with? And then the second question I have too is, given the current political climate, are you seeing more families or are you seeing fewer families, like register interest? And then the third question I have is, like you mentioned, you're serving kids. So by any chance, is Mercy First working with people in the New York City public schools? Because they used to have something like students with temporary housing. I don't know if they still call it that. And so I know I gave you a lot of questions, but those are the three. Like just the first one, just on average, how long does it take a family to go through a process with Mercy First to be designated like, okay, this is a family that we could have children stay with? And then the second question I have is, given the current climate, are you seeing fewer or more families apply? And then the third question is, does Mercy First have any relationships with some folks in the New York City public schools? Because there is an office a few years ago that I knew was called Students with Temporary or Students in Temporary Housing. I don't know if it's still called that same office.
Um,
Okay. To answer your first question
mhm.
in terms of like how long the process is, it depends. Like Zani was saying, like with kinship, there's often more leeway, just because, like we said, we try to maintain that connection as much as possible because this is someone that you are familiar with. In terms of like regular foster parents, I like to say it depends on them. The process could take as little as like 2 months. We have our initial training that's called NTDC training, and that takes like approximately a month. So it just depends on, obviously, like first they have to meet the requirements and stuff, but it just depends on how quickly they're able to turn in their paperwork and do the necessary things. And then also we have to do like a home study to make sure like your home is safe and secure. So that whole thing, the quickest it could take is like 2 months. Again, it just depends on the person's ability and how quickly they're able to do the necessary documentation.
Yep.
I
Um,
forgot the question. Go
I
ahead,
think the
sorry.
second question was, due to the economy and the climate that we're in, like, are we seeing fewer or less? I think it's less. It's kind of tricky because, and this is why we talk about finding quality over quantity, right? Because you have some. I'm just trying to be realistic. You have some foster parents who they try to find a hustle in this, as far as the stipends go, and they try to, well, I'm going to refer someone because this is how I'm doing. Like, look, you could get, and then it becomes a money thing less than, what it's supposed to be about, which is taking care of these children and getting them back reunified with their family at some point. So I guess it could fluctuate. Sometimes it looks like it's on the up and up, but then it'd be for the wrong reasons. You know what I mean? So it'll look like that, or then it might subside or whatever the case. Because again, like I mentioned, some people just think that they're not equipped. They think that they need more than they have. I was talking to one gentleman, and his whole thing was, me and my girl, we're interested, but we just want to get a bigger apartment, bigger this, bigger this, more that, more. And I was just like, I'm not a salesman, so I'm not trying to rebuttal what you're saying to me. I do understand what you're saying, but that's not necessarily what's needed for foster care. We need open arms. We need open hearts. We need people that genuinely just want to help out. Because again, the goal is reunification. So that also means that the goal is a temporary housing situation. So it's kind of like we just looking for people that's willing to help out for the moment. It could be a month. It might be 3 months. The person that's helping out the foster family, they might grow to love the child, and vice versa. Now it's like, well, they can actually stay, and then in that realm, that's how the biological family and the foster families create the bond, which also creates more support for the child. So it just depends. It could fluctuate. It could go up, but then we need to find out why it's going up. Is it going up for the wrong reasons? So
In addition to what Zani said about like people wanting bigger apartments or bigger space, also like we do live in New York and you know a lot of these apartments are cramped. So sometimes we do get people who their hearts is in the right place, but unfortunately they don't meet the basic requirements. Like they don't have the space because this
Right.
is other kids or other people that you're placing in a home. So there are those things, or maybe one person wants to do it, but their partner don't want to. And unfortunately, you both have to agree. Also, the kids have to agree because you are uprooting everyone's life. Everyone's going to be affected. So we have to make sure that everyone's on the same place because we also don't want to put our kids in a situation where they're not wanted because no one wants to be somewhere where they're not wanted. You know, you feel that. So sorry. So those all play a factor. It is sometimes people just want bigger space because they think that's necessary, and sometimes it's just they genuinely just can't. Um, so it could go either way.
Yeah, that's true. That is the flip side of it because some people they have the needs and wants, and they think that they're able to do it, and they are, but sometimes when it comes to documentation, like for instance, like the requirement is, if you have a studio apartment, we can't really move on with the process only because the child needs his own space and his own bedroom, room and board and everything like that. So we run into those walls too, where the prospective person is the right person, but when it comes to documentation and protocols and certain things that just are non-negotiable, that's kind of where we have certain hiccups as well.
Yeah, rent is high in New York, you know?
Yeah.
So, and
Yes,
sometimes,
it
like,
is.
you know, if you want to move to a bigger space, also maybe because like you're single or you're by yourself, they're like, they don't want to give you a bigger space because, you know, so we run into those problems as well. So there's a lot of factors that could go into like the fluctuations.
Yes, and this is why when we find those foster parents, we really try to pour into them as far as educating them and letting them know that we have their back, they have all the support they need. Because again, it's not coming a dime a dozen the way we would hope. Where it's just like, all right, well, we could just tomorrow's a better day. It's like no, you kind of want to keep hold on to who we have because again, it's quality over quantity.
Understood. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate both of you.
Thank you guys.
Yep. Let me see. Let me do one more canvas. Do we have any other questions from folks? So going once, going twice. Okay. I don't see any additional questions. So Zani and Carisha, again, I thank you both so much for taking the time to let us know about Mercy First. So there's some people who know about you already. I'll be honest, I didn't know. And so I thank you both for, your open hearts and minds and doing this stuff because it is hard work. And yes, I echo what the district manager said, where I hope we'll be able to see either one or both of you or some other folks at our nonprofit roundtable on May 19th.
Yes,
Absolutely.
please send us the
Yes,
invite.
we'll be happy to be there.
Definitely do that. And so heads up for you too. So for the next part, I'm gonna turn this over to the other co-chair of it, Claire Jean, to lead this. So we're gonna be doing some planning actually for our nonprofit roundtable. And so if you wanted to, you could stay, or you could be like, oh man, it's cool with 7:05. I got a dip, whatever. But just like
Yeah,
time is
unfortunately,
time.
I'm in the office, so
Yeah,
I have to go. But thank you guys so much for having us, and please definitely send us that invite.
please do. And I'm also gonna exit. I kind of hid in my daughter's room to do this real quick, so I'm gonna go back and do my dad
Sonny, I was
duties.
gonna say your handwriting looks good back there, man. I was gonna say.
Yeah, we're trying. We're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying to raise one as well, over here. So yep.
I feel you. But thank you both though so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you
you.
guys
Bye.
so much. We appreciate your time and your platform. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Definitely. Take care.
Take care. Good night.
All right. And so with that, I turn over the next part of our committee meeting to my esteemed co-chair, Beck Clergy.
Thank you so much, Carl. Good evening, everyone. So our next agenda item is to discuss and plan for the nonprofit roundtable, which is we are a month away. It's happening on May 19th at East Midwood. So this is going to be an opportunity for all of us on the call to be able to talk about the nonprofit roundtable. We started speaking about the format, and some suggestions at our last meeting in February. And so since then, Sean has confirmed, and our speaker for the nonprofit roundtable is actually on with us, Jose Dobles, who is the VP of Programs for the Citizens Committee of New York. So the Citizens Committee has been an organization. Good evening. No, Jose,
Good
how are
evening,
you? Would you
folks.
like to unmute and speak? So
I'd be happy to do my elevator pitch. So good evening, folks. Thank you for having me. My name is Jose Dobles. I'm the VP of Programs at Citizens Committee for New York City, also known as Citizens NYC. We are a philanthropic organization that has been around for close to 50 years. Actually, no, that's a lie. We have been around for 50 years. So it's not close. It's been 50 years. And our mission is to support grassroots community leaders to transform the city they have into the city they want. And we do that primarily through our micro grants and capacity building workshops. So the beauty of what we do is that we fund the grassroots leaders, typically folks who are ineligible for funding from anywhere else. So you could be a volunteer-led organization and get funding from us. You could be a small nonprofit with a budget of under $250,000 to get funding from us, or you could be a public school and get funding from us. So we really are funding folks who are on the front lines of social justice issues and also typically are ineligible from funding from other sources, not because their work isn't impactful, but because they're not sort of either an established nonprofit or their budget isn't like $2 million. So we fund folks who are really sort of on the front lines of the work we care about. That's about it.
thank you so much for sharing that overview of your organization and works. So at our last meeting in February, some of the things that were mentioned, we talked about the nonprofit roundtable agenda in the past few years, where we've had a specific topic or focus area that our speaker addressed, followed by an opportunity for the different nonprofits to sit together and do kind of like a roundtable discussion with some guiding questions. And some of those discussions were facilitated by some of our members of the community board. For some nonprofit representatives who were a little bit, less extroverted, who were more introverted, so they had facilitators, and some representatives were very extroverted and did not need that type of facilitation. In addition, committee members also talked about focusing on data and talking about any data needs based on providing data snapshots, based on district needs to see what trends in terms of services there are in our district. Services, think about services for youth, services around providing food or mental health services. As the Citizens Committee focuses on micro grants and funding at really a local impact, we can try to think of and discuss tonight at tonight's meeting what are some potential topics or a theme that we would like our speaker on. Weeks ago, Carl and I did meet and we talked about some themes. And so I'll share those with you and then we can start having a conversation. So one topic area that we focused on was looking at grassroots power in New York Cities, thinking about how resident-led groups can drive change in their communities. So some focusing on like hyper local leadership and thinking about how residents are impacting change at their own community levels. Second topic that we spoke about was building trust in communities. So overcoming skepticism towards institutions, meeting people where they are, providing services based that are culturally sensitive, services related to people's specific language, and making sure that services are accessible. The third topic that we focused on, Carl and I discussed, we talked about funding equity and access for nonprofits, and we thought that this tied in well with Citizens Committee because this is what they do. So thinking about what barriers do organizations face when accessing funding, because yes, it is. We have a lot of great organizations, but funding is a critical part to be able to do the work in the neighborhood. We that could also involve talking about how to access grants, finding grants, grant writing, and then building trust and thinking about flexible spending. And then another topic that we talked about was sustainable impact of organization, and thinking about how they can maintain their impact over the long term versus some short-term wins. So how to measure their impact beyond numbers, avoiding burnout in the organizations, and kind of like scaling, especially for smaller organizations or projects, scaling without losing their particular mission. So I'll pause there and see if anyone has any feedback on some of the topics that I just mentioned, and see if anyone has anything else that they would like to share for us to consider for our nonprofit roundtable theme. And don't all speak at once. Carl, do you want to jump in and add any context to our conversation that we had a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I was gonna you beat me to the punch about all of us not jumping into the pot at once, but yeah, but basically to echo what Yvette just shared, yeah, there were a couple themes, so those were the four. And actually, what I'll do real quick too, let me write them out in the chat as well too. So give me a second. So in no order, I'm gonna write the high level stuff. So I'm gonna say potential nonprofit roundtable themes. And so
And
we
Carl,
had,
I have them written down
oh, even better.
so I can
Okay,
write
even
them
better.
in.
Okay, even better, even better. So I just posted the colon, and so yeah, you can just copy paste them in the chat. But yeah, for for everyone in the group, basically, it's just we'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of, are there any of these specific themes as you see them in the chat coming up? Are there any of these specific themes that you think are resonating with you? And if so, please share how come, right? Just because, as Yvette mentioned, the two of us, we chatted a few weeks ago, and then for the two of us, we felt, oh, like we're gravitating towards this funding and equity thing, especially given, the mission of the organization New York City Citizens Committee, right? At the same time, because we're co-chairs and we like to speak with our committee members and we love dialogue and discussion, we thought it was important to share what we were thinking and let you know how we got there, and then also hear what you think too, right? Because maybe there's something in the conversation here where some of you say, hey, we hear you. And it also turns out we're gravitating more towards this other theme for another reason. So that's the idea. If it turns out all of you also agree with the funding and equity piece, then great. That'll be our theme, and then we can go to the other stuff. But if there's some other themes that's gravitating towards you more, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So, District Manager Campbell, I see.
Are you, is this sort of the theme around which you are suggesting Jose sort of build the keynote? Or are these the themes that you'd want the small groups to break out and discuss in the small group tables, breakout tables?
This would be for the keynote.
So then I guess it almost looks like one sort of leads nicely to another, but Jose, are there any that resonate with you, or do you see them as being very discrete or related, or what?
No, honestly, I think all of these are great topics. I think, hold on, let me just pull it up. I think obviously the funding and equity and access of small nonprofits is sort of in my sweet spot. But we can talk, I'm happy to sort of address any of the topics that you folks feel is relevant, because I think we can speak to that through our work at Citizens NYC. And I definitely want to take my lead from you all. Like, your constituents best. So I want to make sure whatever I do is informed by what you folks think is most relevant. The one thing I would add, and I would love to get folks' feedback on, is I think as part of the keynote, like we can talk about sort of thematically, funding and equity and access and stuff, but I also want to be able to talk concretely about funding, right? So for example, our grants go live May 4th. So folks can actually apply for our grants within a weeks of, by the time you kick off, we'll be able to talk about it. So I actually wouldn't mind being able to talk about the actual application process, how we make decisions, and give folks some tips in terms of how to apply for our grants. So, I could also sort of build into that keynote like a real like info session around our grants specifically. So when folks leave, they have a good understanding of how to apply for our stuff. So yeah, so that's just one thing I would like to incorporate is like sort of just real concrete hands-on, like this grant, you have a chance to get this grant. So let's like talk about it. So yeah, so that's all. So I'm happy on any topic you folks decide, as long as it lets me incorporate a section where I can like give concrete tips on applying for our grants.
Got you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate that. That's awesome. I guess that's breaking news, information and all that stuff. So, we see two hands, Ozma and then Nina.
Hi everyone, evening. I think I would, second that topic, that theme of funding. I'm just thinking based off of the previous year, there were some major, I think, big nonprofits, but I think a handful of them did fall under, their I guess their operational budgets where they would be eligible to apply with your agency, Jose, for their, for your grants. And, a lot of the grassroots nonprofits that do, in the corridor that do direct services, I think would really benefit from that because there's a lot of people that do come to us at COPO that do request and see if we are able to apply and help them apply, but technically we're at competition with them. So with that said, I think it'll be really helpful to give tips about applying, how to apply, even maybe going over like the application process. I know it's with City Council discretionary, they go over the application process, which is really helpful for many nonprofits who have not gone through that process. And there's a lot of new nonprofits in the area who are not receiving funds. And just started because of these dreams and aspirations that they had. And so it'll be really helpful for them to learn the process in applying for grants and, starting with your organization. I think that would be a great start. And I think, Sean, for the groups to be split up, I think, if you want to continue that theme, having the conversation of, hey, what, grants does organization have and what are your thoughts and tips that you can give to each other. I think that's something that we all do gatekeep, of course, for certain reasons as well, again at competition in the same neighborhoods and areas, but having conversation around the process and the stressful process or even the staffing that's needed to help write the grants. What are the expectations of which go along with the mission of the agency that they've began.
Got you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Ozma. I really appreciate that. Nina, you are up.
Didn't unmute. I think what I'm going to say probably pretty much piggybacks onto what Ozma said. I was struck initially. The one that grabbed me was the grassroots power, but there's a reality check here, which is that it's hard. There are some things that people do where there's really no money involved. I mean, I know people who have made it a thing of just kind of getting food from restaurants and events and things like that, and then redistributing it, and it's kind of a word of mouth thing. But for most of these various projects that people come up with, the bottom line is they've got to have money. Most people, I mean, maybe some people aren't working and they aren't dependent on an income, but you still have overhead costs and operating costs and things like that. So I think that pairing those two in particular could make for a very strong nonprofit, roundtable.
So thank you for sharing, Nina. And Jose, we see you put some info in the chat, so thank you for posting that as well. And then District Manager Campbell, I see you have your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea of grassroots power is just going to be organic in what we're talking about because we are the most local grassroots city agency, the only one charged in the New York City Charter with raising the voices of neighborhood community members. And I think too, Jose, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this. The origin story of Citizens Committee is the story of grassroots organizing into something that became this now sustaining, not just sustained, but sustaining organization. So it seems like that will be easy just to fold in and remind us all that we're, we should feel empowered and on the sidewalks of our communities.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even just touching upon the history of Citizens NYC, like I said, it was started in 1975, essentially when the federal government was cutting off funds to New York City. And then Oz Elliott and some other folks stepped forth and said, you know what? New Yorkers can handle this ourselves. Just given proper support, we can address the issues that are plaguing us. Like, we don't actually need you. It was a big stance to take. And eventually sort of that grew into sort of what we have now, where we fund local folks doing small projects or, projects that eventually like grow much larger over time. But, we're the first grant most organizations get, So it's a good story to tell of just sort of being that first step in a lot of folks' leadership journey.
Awesome. Cool. So then I
Sorry,
don't,
Carl, just one to
yeah, Asma, what's
interject
up?
here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jose, I just saw your comment there in the chat. So a lot of, Amy, I'm just thinking of like the 10 that may be in attendance are all under 250K. And so I think just, thinking as a broader picture of like they might really benefit from a presentation on that and what what your grant process looks like. Even
Yeah,
if it's just one-on-one conversation during, your stay during the roundtable.
No, thank you. I appreciate that information, that context. I think for me, I really would love it if folks could leave with a real sort of next step, right? Like, this is what I'm doing. So if a lot of your folks are eligible for our grants, I would love to give them the tools to kind of just jump right in and start thinking about what they can apply for and just be comfortable with the application process. Because I think, I think folks have mentioned it before. Sometimes folks just don't apply because they think they're not grant writers or they're not good at this. Like, this is not something I could do. So I really just kind of want to demystify that process for folks.
So maybe we make the breakout session, we sort of, we sort organizations out by that criteria. And for those that would qualify and want to hear more and get down in the weeds on an application process to Citizens Committee, that could be at one table or one area of the room, and then that conversation can be continued very specifically with them. And then for those who are in a different orbit, we can have their conversations led in a different way. For instance, those groups could be talking about their pains in getting city contract reimbursements, because my $250,000 organizations probably aren't getting the big ACS grants, or some of them are getting little DYCD ones, but they're not getting the big agency grants that then they aren't getting. That's still a huge issue, the reimbursables on. I just heard that legal services is paying like $900,000 a year in interest on loans that they have to take out while they're waiting for their city contracts to come through. So that's for that side of the room, and then applications to Citizens Committee can be this side of the room. Does that make sense as a possibility?
Yes, I was muted, my bad. But yeah, I think that makes sense. And it seems like as the conversation's coming together, that yeah, it looks like there's good consensus that the funding that can be, yes, that can be basically the item for the keynote. And that can be also something that we can ride to the breakout rooms, to the breakout conversations. Yes, definitely.
Does that make sense to you, Jose? It doesn't mean you're not covering it in the keynote, but it's like more details in the breakout.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm cool with that.
Awesome. And so that question for you. So it looks like we have alignment on the theme for the keynote, but then also
Yes.
that how that would flow into, basically some portion of the breakouts.
Mhm.
And so are there any other questions that you think we need to answer, in terms of the planning for the roundtable?
Yes, definitely want us to talk about the involvement of our board members,
Okay.
and being able to invite the board members. Because it seems like we have one group, one of the breakout will be more focused details about the actual application process for the grant. And then we should have, my recommendation would be to also have some board members on hand to help facilitate conversations amongst other groups who are not going to be applying for the grant, in terms of facilitating, to provide support in facilitating their conversations.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Understood.
And we can either have like, trying to think of, Sean just mentioned it in terms of the conversation that the groups, the organizations can have. But if there anyone else has any other recommendations about breakout questions for groups, organizations that are not applying for the grant, please feel free to share that with us, and then like maybe to help stimulate those conversations.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think. Trying to think. I definitely the question I have is not a new one, just because the nonprofit roundtables that I've been fortunate enough to attend and assist with, this question's always been there, but it's always a good one. Just the question about, each organization at the breakout table, just basically listing, one success that they've had so far, and then also one challenge, because it's interesting how some of those organizations may not think they're related just in terms of the work that they do, but that as they're going around the table and sharing their successes and challenges, it's really cool to see how by the end there's a good portion that realize, oh snap, like we do kind of work in the same space, but we didn't think it before, but we kind of do, right? And some of our successes are similar and some of our challenges are different, and it builds those bridges. So I put that question back out there just because that one always works. So I add that one to the list of questions that we could have in addition to the ones that we've identified so far. Let's see. Do folks have any other potential questions?
Maybe as people think of them, if nothing springs to mind now, just email the office, because what we could do, it seems like in past years, we give the same question to all of the breakout tables and then we get different answers to the same questions, which is certainly valuable and interesting, but maybe this year it could be a little more, a list of 3 or 4 questions and pick one or discuss it all, or maybe groups get together and they organically realize they've all had the same issues and they come up with their own. So it might be just another approach is to kind of let it loosen it up a little bit and see what groups gravitate toward talking about.
That's true. That's true. So then if I understand you correctly, Sean, could it be, hey, when we get to the breakout session part, it's like, yes, the folks who are interested in going deeper into the grant application process, they can go, at these tables. And then for folks who are maybe interested in, the mayor's office of nonprofit services or whatever, they go here. And then folks who are interested in, something else, then they just gravitate there and they just chat kind of there. Like I know I'm just spitballing right now, but
Maybe, or just, everybody will have that. We usually assign the breakout tables as people walk in, so just
Mhm.
have a list of questions at each table and just like,
Yeah.
these are conversation starters if you need them.
Okay.
We are going to ask you to bring 1 point back from the breakout room to share with the larger group.
Got you. Okay.
I just put in 2 questions that we could also consider for the breakout groups for consideration. The first is, what's one thing funders misunderstand about neighborhood-based organizations? And then the second is, how can local leaders advocate for more equitable funding distribution?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, those are great questions, Yvette. Wow. True.
I think also, focusing on the programs and the impacts, how are we all measuring the impact beyond just the numbers that we have to submit for the reports? I think that's very helpful. Like a lot of the times we are, including at Copa, we're posting, we did X amount of, pounds of food or X amount of families, which is great, but it's like reminding how to connect back to the mission, I think, of the organization. So again, like the programs and impact, and then like what's a program we've had to rethink and pivot. That's something I don't think organizations talk about that openly. So it's like a challenge question to have that's something that we gatekeep that didn't work. In my opinion, but then also how do you balance just the cultural, I think, competence with scalability in the programming when it comes to diverse communities in CB14. I think that's a great idea in terms, and that's one thing I really liked last year is that when I participated, I was paired with people, organizations that I didn't speak to before, didn't know some of them that existed in CB14, and we actually became partners and now work on different programs and workshops with them. But with that said, collaboration also. What does collaboration? Where do we see opportunities for deeper collaboration between the organizations that we are, I guess, paired with or sitting next to? Sorry, just a couple of things I had in mind.
Got you. So thank you,
Definitely
Asma. So let
email
me
more
wrap this.
questions if you'd like.
Yeah, share 'em. Please do. In the meantime, I'm gonna write one of them down. Like I see Yvette got one of them, the measuring impact one. I'm gonna write this other one down and let me know if I got it right. I'm saying where do we see opportunities for collaboration? Was that one of them, Asma?
Yes, and not just, I want to say surface level, like a deeper collaboration.
Okay, so let me correct that then. I'm gonna put in the chat, where do we see where do we see opportunities for deeper levels?
Collaboration between organizations.
Okay.
I love that because it kind of goes back to the roots of the original nonprofit roundtable. When it first started, it was really just like just getting the CBOs in the same place at the same time and having them realize that it was actually sort of at the end of the foreclosure crisis. And so the way grants worked there is some agencies had, or some organizations had funding to do one aspect and others had another, and they really needed to refer to each other, but they weren't familiar with each other. So that sort of like bond building in the community to strengthen our human service and community service network. I love that because it also then drives also what a community board is, and I like that, staying on theme. I'm sorry, I just jumped in and Florencia had her hand up. I'll go back to trying to be polite again.
Good night. Good night, everyone. It's okay, Sean. It's your baby. You know how it is with our babies. So I get it. Uh, I love what Asma says because there are times when I see organizations putting on events or, you know, not knowing that there are others that sometimes, as you said, Sean, there are some organizations that get less funding and others that get more. and some that deal with one aspect and some deal with the other. And I know before in the past that there have been organizations that have made that alliance and have reached more people. And I think, sometimes I see that when, a smaller organization or one with less funding, when they join with another, they reach more people and they're more effective in the community. So I really love the collaborating effort. Yes, just wanted to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Florencia. Always appreciated. Nina, I see you have your hands up.
Yes, I was just going to say that there may be organizations that are providing services in the neighborhood that are relying totally on donations and not, even aware that they could increase their reach and, improve and increase their services if they were able to get, funding from some outside source beyond just, the goodness of people's hearts.
That is very true. I feel silly because even when, as you were mentioning, I was thinking, oh yeah, that's so true. There are many people and groups of people helping people strictly on donations alone. That's very true. I feel foolish that I forgot about that until you mentioned that. So thank you so much for sharing that, Nina. I really do.
And
Trying to think.
just kind of adding to that,
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know how much awareness, the community board has of some of these organizations, but, I hope that, there'll be some outreach to try to bring them in because, and having gone to a number of these over the years, it seems to be, there's some new faces, but a lot of them are the same players. And, so I'm just tossing that out there.
And
Nina, any ideas you have about how to expand our outreach would be
yeah,
greatly appreciated because we do, we do want to grow this as much as we can. We want to be as inclusive. It's the whole point.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, any help with that would be appreciated.
Okay. I'll have to I'll have to think on that one and see what I can come up with.
yeah, and I also that you said that. I also wanted to say that Sean, what was that group you brought? Was it Brooklyn.org? Was it Brooklyn.org or Brooklyn?
Yeah, I think that Sabrina's going from that organization. She lives in the district, so she'll be back.
So I wanted to say that at least a couple of organizations reached out to them and got assistance. So there's that, you know.
And I'll work with Mike Cedillo from the Mayor's Office of Nonprofit Services and see if he's in touch with any groups in our district that we don't already know about. So that might be another way into that, to the others, to more, and maybe a flyer. I mean, I get concerned about flyers for things that aren't public events, but maybe we could get it out at least through newsletter networks, not like flyers posted in the grocery store, but we put everybody's flyer in our newsletter, so maybe they'll return the favor. And those are a little more directed.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be good. Or the ones that we can send to organizations that we know, not for profits. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. That's true.
And maybe Jose will help. Maybe Citizens Committee has a list by community district or council district or zip code that they can help us with the outreach that's targeted to our community as well. So I'll follow up on that.
Sure.
Or
I
the
can
elected
pull.
officials.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was interrupting someone.
No, go ahead, Mr. Dobbs.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying I could also pull grantee partners from your community board too, and just as a reference.
Sweet. Okay. Follow up. And co-chairs, I'd like to send this invitation out, at least the one that is sort of letter form, tomorrow-ish, Wednesday at the latest. So I'll send the draft to you. I wasn't going to change it very much, but if I could get that to you and, if you want to turn it around in a day or so, we'll try to get it out by midweek this week.
Okay. Cool. Definitely. The only thing I can think of left is just the only thing I can think of less is just how are we gonna have how are we gonna have board members, indicate their availability for the nonprofit roundtable, right? Like, are we just gonna like I forget what we did last year. Did we just have people email the board office and the district office in advance just to say, okay, so
Yeah, I think we send out an email that kind of comes from the two of you asking for volunteers on the day and gives the details and what's expected, and then they just email us back and then we keep you posted.
cool. Okay. So
And there'll be time at the board meeting. I think our board meeting is May 11th, so you can try to
mhm.
gin up some participation there.
Yep, definitely. Okay, cool. Yeah, it is May 11th. Mhm.
Just be like Carnella.
Maybe you can contract her out.
Yep.
I don't know. How does a contract work with a non-paid city volunteer? I don't know. And Deborah, to answer your question, so it's going to take place at the East Midwood Jewish Center. So that's where we'll be.
Catered by Dubby Zeitland and events by Dubby.
Mhm.
Thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Awesome. So I think so that how do we feel? You feeling good? You feeling kind of like how you feeling about where we are so far with the planning for the roundtable?
We're in a great place.
Awesome.
We're in a great place, and the invite letter will go out this midweek. Sean said she's going to send us to
Yep.
review. So I think we're great. Does anyone else have any comments or anything else they'd like to share that we did not discuss yet? Okay.
See
So I think being that there's
Oh, I'm
nothing else to
sorry.
discuss.
I'm
Oh,
sorry. Please,
Florencia?
yes. Please remember that Brookdale is having their final, for the, before the holiday, June 1st, in-person meeting, uh, and being your co-chairs and whoever is on your committee, just to let you know that they will be hosting their in-person meeting at Brookdale. And it's June. What date did I say again? June 1st, the first Monday. It will be on June 1st at Brookdale. So, um, and they're inviting members of the community and the community board. And usually, as I said, Dr. Scott is there, and also they usually bring all the heads of each department there to tell about what's happening in the department, what's new, and so forth and so on. So
Florencia, if you get anything via email, will you make sure that I get a copy and I'll send it out to the co-chairs and the committee members as well as the chair?
most definitely, that
Thank
was
you.
via word of mouth though before.
Yeah,
So I
hold
know that
the
goes
date.
in.
More information to follow.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Thank you.
Sweet. Okay, awesome. Yeah. Are we in the other business section right now? Or
Yes.
okay, cool. The only thing I can mention, so I went onto that SUNY Downstate, Stronger Downstate website. I registered to get updates. I forget when I did that though, so I have to check, I can be pedantic when I need to be. And so, so I need to check if some of my stuff is on. But yeah, what I need to do is I need to check if I did receive confirmation that I had signed up to receive notifications or whatever. Because if I did, then great. And then if not, then this means I'll just be checking that website regularly just to see whatever news they do post up there about stuff. And then I'm also just thinking about are there any letters or emails to write to the various elected officials about better communication and status updates and things like that too? So that's just something to share regarding what I'm trying to do to at least get more information and understanding of the next steps for SUNY Downstate.
Thank you for sharing that, Carl. Anyone else, announcements or other business would like to discuss?
I guess not. We're running a tough crowd, but
I know. I think that means that our meeting is coming to an end because there's nothing, no other announcements or any other business.
Mhm. I agree
Okay.
with you.
Okay, well, thank you everyone so much for your attendance and participation. We look forward to all of you being part of the nonprofit roundtable on May 19th. And we will see you at our next committee meeting and then at the board meeting next month.
All right.
Yep.
Have
Thank
a
you,
good
folks.
evening. Thank you.
You too as
Good
well.
night, folks.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much
Good
for joining
night.
us,
Thank
Jose.
you.
Bye,
Have a good night,
everybody.
folks.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Good night, everyone.